My name is Cassandra Mitchell, but everyone calls me Cassie. At 34 years old, I was driving my modest sedan up the winding road to my family's sprawling estate, dreading the annual Mitchell family meeting. For years they'd looked down on my career choices, believing I'd failed the family legacy. Little did they know about the empire I'd quietly built while they were busy judging me. If you've ever been underestimated by people who were supposed to support you, stick around. Before I tell you what happened when my helicopter landed, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear stories about turning rejection into triumph. The Mitchell name carried weight in banking and real estate circles across New England. Our family had built their fortune over generations, and the pressure to contribute to that legacy weighed on each of us from birth. I was the middle child, sandwiched between two perfect siblings who embraced the Mitchell path without question. My father, Harold Mitchell, now 72, had expanded our family's banking interests internationally, while maintaining the stern, unyielding demeanor of old money. His silver hair was always impeccably styled, his suits custom-made, and his expectations impossibly high. My mother, Diana, 70, complemented him perfectly with her society connections, charity board positions, and talent for subtle disapproval. She had mastered the art of the disappointed sigh, deployed whenever I failed to meet her standards of success. James, my older brother by 8 years, was the golden child. 42. He had followed our father into investment banking, married Catherine from another prestigious family, of course, and produced two perfect children who were already being groomed for prep schools. James lived for status symbols, his Aston Martin, his vacation home in the Hamptons, his membership at exclusive clubs that still didn't accept women or minorities. The future of the Mitchell dynasty, my father would toast at family gatherings, raising a glass to James while I struggled not to roll my eyes. Then there was Amber, my younger sister by 4 years. At 30, she had parlayed her business degree and our family connections into a position as an executive at a luxury fashion house. With her perfect blowout, designer wardrobe and 300,000 Instagram followers, Amber was the family's social butterfly and influencer. Her curated life looked flawless online, though I knew the anxiety attacks and insecurities that lurked behind her filtered photos. Completing our immediate family circle were Uncle Warren and Aunt Judith, my father's brother and his wife. Warren had always lived in my father's shadow, making him particularly critical of anyone who didn't conform to family expectations. Aunt Judith collected jewelry and gossip with equal enthusiasm. Their children, my cousins Blake and Taylor, competed with each other and everyone else for family approval, flaunting their wealth at every opportunity. I had always been different. My rebellion started early, choosing computer science instead of finance or business for my degree, wearing jeans to formal family dinners. I moved to San Francisco and joined a small tech startup. My family was horrified. Playing with computers when you could be building real wealth, Uncle Warren had scoffed during a holiday dinner. What a waste of potential. For years I endured their judgment. The condescending questions about my little job, the pitying looks when I mentioned my apartment instead of a house, the pointed comments about my cousin Taylor's new Porsche. What they didn't know, what I had deliberately kept from them, was that my playing with computers had evolved into something extraordinary. As I pulled up to the estate's circular driveway that Friday afternoon, I spotted the familiar lineup of luxury vehicles. James's Aston Martin, Amber's Maserati, my father's Bentley, my uncle's Jaguar. My Audi A4, while nice enough, looked positively modest by comparison, exactly as I had planned. The family butler, Morris, who had known me since childhood, greeted me at the door. "Miss Cassandra, welcome home," he said warmly, taking my weekend bag. "Thank you, Morris. How have you been?" I asked, genuinely interested. Morris had always been kind to me, even during my rebellious teenage years. "Very well, thank you. Your family is gathered in the main living room." I took a deep breath and walked down the hallway, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The Mitchell estate hadn't changed much over the years. Still the same oil paintings of stern ancestors, antique furniture that valued pedigree over comfort, and ostentatious displays of wealth at every turn. When I entered the living room, all eyes turned to me. My mother rose first, approaching with her arms outstretched for our customary air kiss. Cassandra, darling, you finally arrived. We were beginning to worry, she said. Maybe I have something you could borrow. And so it began, the subtle digs, the backhanded compliments, the reminders of where I stood in the family hierarchy. I smiled through it all, knowing what they didn't. I had built something valuable, something truly mine, without their connections or approval. And before this weekend was over, they would finally know it too. I watched my family as they settled into their usual roles, my father at the head of the table, commanding attention, my mother to his right, the perfect complement. A toast to another prosperous year for the Mitchells. Hear, hear. Everyone responded, the crystal clinking delicately. James, my father said after the first course had been served, tell everyone about the Westlake development. The numbers came in even better than projected, didn't they? James straightened his tie, clearly pleased to be in the spotlight. We closed at 18% above our initial projections. The commercial spaces were fully leased before construction even finished. That's my boy, my father beamed. The largest commercial development in the city's history, and a Mitchell at the helm. Catherine placed her hand on James's arm, her 3-carat diamond catching the light. They're talking about featuring James in Business Monthly's 40 Under 45 special issue. Wonderful, my mother cooed. We'll need to arrange a proper photo shoot. The one they used for your father's feature years ago was dreadful. Aunt Judith turned her attention to Amber. And what about you, dear? That ring is new, isn't it? My mother explained to Catherine's parents, who were visiting for the weekend. His family owns Sanders Shipping. Excellent match. The wedding will be next June at the plaza, Amber continued. I've already secured the designer for my dress. Exclusive, of course. Only 3 other brides will wear his designs next season. I took a large sip of wine as the table erupted in congratulations. Bradley Sanders was exactly the kind of man my parents had always wanted their daughters to marry, wealthy, from the right family, and utterly conventional. I had dated him briefly in college before realizing we had absolutely nothing in common beyond our tax brackets. And what about you, Cassandra? Uncle Warren turned to me, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Any news from your venture? All eyes turned to me. This was the moment in every family gathering I dreaded most, when I was expected to present my accomplishments for judgment and inevitable disappointment. My company is doing well, I said simply. We've expanded our team and moved into larger offices. What is it that you do again? Blake asked, though I'd explained it at least a dozen times before. Something with apps? We develop enterprise software solutions focusing on AI integration for healthcare systems, I explained. Our platform helps medical professionals identify patterns and potential diagnoses faster than. Fascinating, my father interrupted, clearly not finding it fascinating at all. James, tell everyone about the new yacht. And just like that, I was dismissed. James launched into details about his 47-foot luxury vessel, while I pushed my roasted duck around the plate. No longer hungry. Playing with computers, Uncle Warren muttered. Just loud enough for me to hear. Harold offered you a vice presidency at Mitchell Financial right out of college, you know? You could have been where James is now. I'm exactly where I want to be, Uncle Warren, I replied evenly. Such a shame, Aunt Judith whispered to my mother, not bothering to lower her voice enough. She was always so bright. What went wrong? Perhaps she just hasn't met the right man to guide her, my mother responded. Someone with vision. I gripped my fork tighter, reminding myself that losing my temper would only reinforce their perception of me as the family disappointment. I had built my company from nothing, without their connections or financial support. I had created jobs, developed technology that saved lives, and yes, accumulated wealth beyond what even James had achieved. But none of that mattered here, because success only counted in the Mitchell family if it followed their prescribed path. As dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate structure that was more architecture than food, Catherine leaned across the table. Cassie, if you're ever ready for a more established position, James knows several excellent headhunters. For someone your age, it's not too late to start building a real career. My career is quite real, Catherine, but thank you for your concern, I replied. 4 years old now. I smiled, thinking of the 3 luxury vehicles currently in my garage in San Francisco. chosen for their environmental features rather than status. It gets me where I need to go. That's our Cassie, James said with a patronizing smile. Always practical. As the dinner concluded and the family moved to the library for brandy, I hung back, taking a moment alone in the dining room. The weight of their judgment felt suffocating, as it always did. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't leaving the weekend as the family disappointment. This time everything would change. Saturday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Mitchell Estates grand study. This imposing room, with its mahogany bookshelves, leather-bound first editions and oil paintings of stern-faced Mitchell patriarchs, had hosted our family meetings for generations. The massive conference table at its center, rumored to have once belonged to a 19th-century railroad tycoon, gleamed under the crystal chandelier. I arrived 5 minutes early, choosing a seat near the middle of the table, not challenging my father's position at the head, but not hiding at the far end either. One by one, the family members filed in. James and Catherine entered together, coordinated in business attire as if this were a corporate merger rather than a family discussion. Amber followed, already scrolling through her phone. The purpose of our annual meeting, as always, is to review our collective investments, discuss the Mitchell legacy, and ensure we're all contributing appropriately to the family's continued prosperity. I suppressed a sigh, having heard this speech in various forms since I was old enough to sit at the adult table. The contributing appropriately part was always directed primarily at me. Before we review the numbers, my father continued, I want to emphasize that the Mitchell name represents excellence, tradition, and strategic growth. For over a century, our family has expanded its influence while maintaining the core values established by my grandfather. My mother nodded solemnly. The responsibility of carrying forward this legacy falls to each of us. The choices we make reflect not just on ourselves, but on generations of Mitchells past and future. I resisted the urge to point out that generations of Mitchells had included some questionable characters, including a great-uncle whose Prohibition-era importing business had significantly boosted the family fortunes. The Mitchell legacy, like most old money histories, had been carefully sanitized over time. Now, my father said, let's begin with individual reports. James. My brother stood, straightening his designer tie as he activated a professional presentation on the room's projection screen. His financial overview was meticulous: property acquisitions, investment returns, strategic partnerships. Each slide showcased impressive numbers, complete with upward trending graphs. The Mitchell financial expansion into Asian markets has exceeded projections by 22%, he announced proudly. And the Westlake development has already generated media attention as the commercial real estate coup of the year. Excellent work, son, my father beamed, as the rest of the family applauded. This is exactly the kind of bold thinking that builds generational wealth. Amber presented next, detailing her role in securing an exclusive partnership between her fashion house employer and 3 luxury hotel chains. The contract is valued at $12 million, she explained, and I've negotiated for the Mitchell Foundation to be the beneficiary of the launch gala next fall. Strategic and socially beneficial, my mother approved. The governor has already confirmed his attendance. Uncle Warren and Aunt Judith shared updates on their real estate holdings and philanthropic board positions. Even my cousins Blake and Taylor had impressive portfolios to present. Blake's private equity investments and Taylor's expansion of the family's art collection with pieces guaranteed to appreciate significantly. Then all eyes turned to me. Cassandra, my father said, his tone already containing a note of preemptive disappointment. Your update. I stood, conscious of not having prepared an elaborate slideshow like my siblings. Tech care continues to grow steadily, I began. Our AI diagnostic platform has now been implemented in 78 hospitals across the country, and we're beginning international expansion next quarter. Hospitals? Uncle Warren interrupted. I thought you made phone games or something. No, Uncle Warren. We've never made games, I explained patiently. Our technology helps doctors identify patterns in medical data that might otherwise be missed. It's particularly effective in rare disease diagnosis. How fascinating. Catherine said with the exact tone one might use to describe a child's crayon drawing. Is there much money in that sort of thing? Healthcare technology is actually one of the fastest growing sectors. I began, but James cut me off. The question is about return on investment, Cassie. What are the actual numbers? Our last funding round valued the company at. Funding rounds? My father interrupted, frowning. You're still taking investor money? James interjected. That's not how we build wealth, Cassie. That's how you end up working for someone else. I took a deep breath. Actually, I've maintained controlling interest while. Perhaps. My mother interrupted gently. It's time to consider taking a proper position within Mitchell Financial. Your father could create a technology division for you to oversee. That's very thoughtful. Mother, but I'm committed to tech care, I replied. Commitment is admirable, Aunt Judith said with a thin smile. But pragmatism is essential. You're not getting any younger, dear. Catherine leaned forward. There's no shame in admitting when an experiment hasn't worked out as planned. Everyone at this table has had investments that underperformed. Tech care isn't underperforming, I insisted, feeling my frustration build. In fact, the point of these meetings, my father interrupted firmly, is to ensure the Mitchell legacy continues to grow. James and Amber have clearly demonstrated their contributions. Your computer project seems to be merely maintaining. From across the table, Cousin Blake snickered. Tech geeks and hoodies aren't exactly building empires, Cassie. Not everyone understands business at the level this family operates, Taylor added with false sympathy. Maybe something more straightforward would suit you better. I looked around the table at my family, these people who claim to want the best for me while systematically undermining my choices and achievements. They had already decided my venture was insignificant without bothering to understand it. Listening to my family discuss investment strategies and asset allocations as if I weren't there. Occasionally, someone would glance my way with a look of pity or condescension. James made a point of explaining basic financial concepts for everyone's benefit, though his explanations were clearly directed at me. By the time we broke for lunch, I had been effectively sidelined in my own family meeting. As everyone filed out toward the dining room, Amber paused beside me. Don't take it personally, she whispered. They just want what's best for you. Maybe try wearing something more professional to these meetings? Perception matters, you know. I looked down at my simple but elegant dress that had cost more than Amber's entire outfit, though she would never know it. The difference was, I didn't feel the need to display designer logos to prove my worth. Thanks for the advice, I replied, deciding that the time for my revelation was drawing closer. After a tense lunch where I mostly pushed food around my plate while enduring more subtle jabs about my career choices, we reconvened in the study for what my father called the family assets discussion. This was traditionally when the family trust allocations were reviewed, a process that had grown increasingly uncomfortable for me over the years. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the antique Persian rug as my father took his position at the head of the table again, a leather portfolio in front of him. Uncle Warren sat at his right hand, wearing the satisfied expression of someone about to witness an anticipated reckoning. As you all know, my father began, the Mitchell Family Trust is structured to provide for the continued success of future generations, while ensuring responsible stewardship of our collective wealth. Responsible had always been the operative word when it came to my portion of the trust. This year, he continued, based on demonstrated financial acumen and contribution to family interests, we'll be implementing some adjustments to the allocation structure. My mother nodded encouragingly as my father opened the portfolio and began reviewing the numbers. James would receive the largest portion to expand his real estate development projects. Amber would receive a substantial allocation for her upcoming wedding and to establish her marital household with Bradley. Even my cousins Blake and Taylor were granted significant funds for their respective ventures. Then my father cleared his throat. Regarding Cassandra's portion, after careful consideration, we believe the most prudent approach is to place her allocation under James's management, within a structured investment vehicle. The room fell silent. I stared at my father. It's for your own protection, dear, my mother interjected smoothly. James has demonstrated exceptional investment returns. I'm 34 years old, I said. I think I can manage my own inheritance. James leaned forward, his expression one of practiced concern. Cassie, this isn't a punishment. Think of it as leveraging the family's expertise. Your portion will grow under proper management. Proper management, I repeated. As opposed to my management. Uncle Warren cleared his throat. Financial responsibility requires certain aptitudes, Cassandra. Not everyone possesses them naturally. And you believe I don't possess these aptitudes. Your choices speak for themselves, my father said firmly. Driving a car well past its prime when you could. My choices reflect different priorities, I interrupted. Not financial incompetence. Aunt Judith patted my hand patronizingly. Catherine added with false sympathy. James manages all our investments. I pulled my hand away from Aunt Judith's. I've been managing my own finances successfully for years. Successfully? Blake scoffed. You live in a rented apartment and work at a company no one's heard of. What exactly is successful about that? That's enough, Blake, my father said, though his tone lacked any real reprimand. What? We're all thinking it, Blake continued. Face it, Uncle Harold, you've got 2 successful children and one who's… well, but something else, something stronger crystallized. I stood up slowly, gathering my tablet and phone. Where are you going? My father demanded. We haven't finished the allocations. I believe you have, I replied calmly. You've made your opinions of me and my choices quite clear. If you'll excuse me, I need to make a call. Cassandra. Without waiting for a response, I left the study and walked through the mansion's grand hallway to the garden terrace. The fresh air helped clear the suffocating feeling that had built in my chest during the meeting. I took several deep breaths, then pulled out my phone and dialed. Ryan? It's Cassie. Before expectations and judgments had created the chasm between my family and me. 4 years, I'd maintained the facade they expected, the modest lifestyle, the apologetic explanations of my career, the acceptance of their condescension, all because some part of me still yearned for their approval, still believed I needed to earn my place at the Mitchell table. But not anymore. Blake had called me the poor Mitchell for the last time. By evening, my family would finally see the truth, and I would finally be free of their judgment. The evening found the Mitchell family gathered on the estate's sprawling terrace for pre-dinner drinks. Crystal glasses of champagne reflected the golden light of the setting sun as servants circulated with trays of canapés. My absence from the remainder of the afternoon meeting had caused quite a stir. But I had rejoined them for the evening gathering, my calm demeanor clearly confusing those expecting tears or sulking. Cassandra has always been sensitive. I overheard my mother explaining to Catherine's parents. Since childhood. She'll come around once she's had time to reflect on her father's wisdom. I sipped my champagne silently, checking my watch. Any minute now. My father was holding court near the stone balustrade, discussing next year's investment strategy with James and Uncle Warren. Then I heard it, the distant thump of helicopter blades cutting through the air. Conversations faltered as the sound grew louder. Heads turned toward the sky, searching for the source of the interruption. Is someone else arriving? My mother asked, frowning at the disruption to her perfectly orchestrated evening. The Sanders have a helicopter. Squinting up at it. That's an AW-139. Latest model. Who on earth? My father began, his annoyance at the uninvited arrival evident. The helicopter circled once before beginning its descent toward the estate's rarely used helipad, a concrete area beyond the rose garden that had been installed years ago for my father's occasional business associates but had seen little use recently. Should I call security? Uncle Warren asked, already reaching for his phone. No need, I said calmly, setting down my champagne glass. They're expected. All eyes turned to me. You invited someone? Without discussing it with me first? My mother asked, aghast at the breach of protocol. I simply smiled and began walking toward the helipad. After a moment of stunned silence, curiosity overcame their indignation, and my family followed me across the manicured lawn. The helicopter's blade slowed as it completed a perfect landing. The door opened, and a man in a crisp pilot's uniform stepped out. He scanned the gathered crowd until his eyes found me, then smiled and offered a respectful nod. "Miss Mitchell," he called over the diminishing engine noise. "Right on schedule as requested." "Thank you, Ryan," I replied. "Excellent landing as always." My family stood frozen, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. "Cassandra," my father finally spoke, his authoritative voice attempting to regain control of the situation. "What is the meaning of this? Who is this man?" "This is Ryan Cooper, my personal pilot," I explained simply. "Your what?" James sputtered. "Your pilot," Amber echoed. "You can't possibly afford a $3 million helicopter?" I finished for him. "Actually, I can. This particular model was $4.2 million with the customizations I requested." Blake's jaw had literally dropped open. "But you drive an Audi A4. By choice," I clarified. "I also own a Tesla Model S and a vintage Porsche 911 that I keep in my garage in San Francisco." "I own the penthouse of that building," I corrected her. "The entire top floor. I purchased it 3 years ago." The little apartment story was simply easier than explaining why I chose to buy a $12 million property. Catherine's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the stone patio. No one moved to clean it up. "This is absurd," James declared. "If you had this kind of money, we would know about it. The family would know." "Would you?" I asked. "You've never actually asked about my company's valuation or my personal finances. You all just assumed I was struggling because I didn't follow the Mitchell path." My father's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "Explain yourself. Now." "Tech Care, my little computer project, as you've called it. I've privately invested in 14 other tech startups, 8 of which have already exited successfully." The stunned silence returned, broken only by the distant call of a bird somewhere in the estate gardens. "1.2 billion? Uncle Warren repeated, his voice barely audible. "That's not possible," Blake insisted. "You're making this up." Ryan approached me with a leather portfolio. "Miss Mitchell, the documents you requested." "Thank you, Ryan." I accepted the portfolio and opened it. Removing several glossy magazines and newspapers, I handed them to my father one by one. "Forbes 40 Under 40-foot issue from last month. Page 32 has a nice profile. And Business Insider's piece on silent angel investors, where I mention, though not by name, I value my privacy." My father stared at the publications, flipping pages with increasingly unsteady hands. "But why?" my mother finally asked. "Why keep this from us? We're your family." I looked at her, suddenly feeling tired of the charade I'd maintained for years. "Because I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I own. I wanted my achievements to be recognized on their own merit." Blake said it, but everyone agreed. No one defended me. No one suggested that perhaps success could be measured by something other than the size of my house or the model of my car. Uncle Warren was already asking about investment opportunities. Aunt Judith was mentioning her friend whose daughter works in computers too. Blake and Taylor looked shell-shocked, recalculating their position in the family hierarchy now that their poor cousin had revealed herself to be anything but. As the sun set over the Mitchell estate, the family that had judged me for years scrambled to adapt to this new reality, and I finally understood that their approval had never been worth seeking in the first place. After the initial shock of my revelation, my family regrouped with remarkable speed. We had moved from the terrace back into the grand living room, where Morris had served a selection of rare whiskeys from my father's collection. Apparently, the occasion suddenly warranted the bottles he saved for special guests. "I always knew you had potential, Cassandra," my father announced, as if he hadn't spent years criticizing my career choices. "Mitchell blood will tell, after all." "Your determination is certainly a family trait," my mother added, already reimagining history. "I've always told my friends that you inherited Harold's business acumen and my creative thinking." His tone a strange mixture of accusation and deference. "The family could have helped you grow even faster." "Could you have?" I asked mildly. "Tech Care operates in a sector none of you understand or respect. Your advice would have been to sell early and invest in real estate." James flushed but didn't contradict me. "Well, What matters is that now we know, Uncle Warren interjected smoothly. And speaking of investment opportunities, I've been looking at a promising development in. I'm not interested in your development, Uncle Warren, I interrupted, or any other investment opportunities you suddenly want to share with me. His face fell. There's no need to be hostile, Cassandra. We're family. Are we? I set down my glass and looked around the room. Because this morning I was the family disappointment. Not meeting my eyes. Were you? Or were you saying what everyone in this family has thought for years? I challenged him. That I was less than the rest of you because I chose a different path? That my success only counted if it looked exactly like yours. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. That's unfair, my father finally said. We've always supported you. Have you? Mother told her friends I was finding myself. As if I was on some post-college gap year instead of building a company. For years, I've listened to comments about my little job and computer games because none of you bothered to understand what I actually do. We asked about your work, my mother protested weakly. You asked if it was making me enough money to buy a proper car, I corrected her. Not once did anyone in this family ask about the lives our technology has saved, the medical breakthroughs we've facilitated, or the passion that drives me. It was always about the bottom line, the status symbols, the Mitchell way of measuring success. Do you know why I rent instead of buying a mansion in the suburbs? Because I prefer living in the city, close to my team, where we work together to create something meaningful. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the fruits of your success, Catherine interjected defensively. You don't need to judge our choices just because you've made different ones. That's exactly my point, I said. I never judged your choices. I never looked down on your career path or belittled your achievements. Cassandra, we only wanted what was best for you. No, I said quietly but firmly. You wanted what was familiar to you. There's a difference. Amber, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. You're right. All eyes turned to her in surprise. We've been awful to you, Cassie. I've been awful. I mocked your clothes in your car and your apartment because they didn't fit my idea of success, without ever asking if you were actually happy. Her unexpected honesty created a crack in the family's unified defense. I may have been dismissive of your work, Uncle Warren admitted reluctantly. The technology sector isn't my area of expertise. And I shouldn't have made that poor Mitchell comment, Blake mumbled. It was mean-spirited. My mother stepped toward me. I understand that, I acknowledged. But there are many forms of security beyond the Mitchell family definition. You've certainly proven that, my father said, a hint of genuine admiration finally breaking through his composed facade. Building a billion-dollar company from the ground up. That's remarkable by any standard. It is, I agreed. And I did it without the Mitchell name opening doors. Without family connections smoothing the way. I did it by believing in a vision that none of you could see. So what happens now? James asked, the practical businessman asserting himself again. Will you merge your company with Mitchell Financial? We could create a technology division with you at the helm. I laughed softly. No, James. TechCare remains independent. What happens now is that I stop pretending to be less successful than I am to spare your egos. I stop accepting condescension and judgment from people who haven't bothered to understand my work. And your relationship with the family? My mother asked anxiously. That depends on the family. I replied. I'm willing to build relationships based on mutual respect. I'm not willing to continue the dynamic we've had for the past decade. Of course we respect you, my father insisted, though his tone suggested this respect was newly minted rather than long-standing. Then prove it, I challenged him. Not because I'm suddenly wealthy enough to earn a seat at the Mitchell table, but because I'm your daughter and I've built something valuable by any measure, not just a financial one. A moment of silence followed as my father seemed to truly see me for the first time in years. You're right, he finally said. We've been measuring everything by a very narrow standard. Perhaps it's time we broadened our perspective. I'd like that, I said, feeling a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. And for what it's worth, I never rejected the Mitchell legacy entirely. I just needed to define success on my own terms. How did you find the courage to follow your own path? It wasn't courage at first, I admitted. It was stubbornness. The courage came later, when I had to persevere despite doubting myself, partly because of how this family reacted to my choices. I'm sorry, she said simply, and I could see genuine regret in her eyes. One by one, my family members offered their own versions of apologies and reconciliation. Some were more genuine than others. I doubted Uncle Warren had experienced a complete personality transformation, but it was a start. By the time we moved to the dining room for a late dinner, the dynamic had shifted. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't the Mitchell family disappointment. I wasn't the poor relation being tolerated at the table. I was Cassandra Mitchell, successful entrepreneur, being asked thoughtful questions about my company, my vision, and my journey. And while part of me couldn't help noticing that it had taken a helicopter and $1 billion valuation to earn this respect, another part recognized that families, like individuals, could grow and change. The Mitchell legacy didn't have to remain trapped in outdated definitions of success. Perhaps with time and continued effort on both sides, it could evolve into something more inclusive, more diverse in its values. As Morris served the main course, I caught my father watching me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Not just pride. Raising his glass in a toast that would have been unimaginable 24 hours earlier. Who has taught us all that the Mitchell drive for excellence can take unexpected and impressive forms. To Cassandra, the family echoed, and for once, I accepted their recognition without qualification or doubt. The family that had called me poor now saw me clearly at last. Not because of my helicopter or my billions, but because my success had finally forced them to look beyond their narrow vision and recognize that I had built a different kind of wealth, one measured in innovation, purpose, and integrity. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright over the Mitchell estate. My helicopter stood ready on the helipad, its polished exterior gleaming in the morning light. Ryan had arrived early to prepare for our departure, and now he waited respectfully by the aircraft while I said my goodbyes. My family had gathered on the terrace, a stark contrast to their dismissive attitudes when I'd arrived just 2 days earlier. The revelation of my success had certainly changed their perspective, but our confrontation had led to something more meaningful than mere financial respect. For perhaps the first time we had spoken honestly with each other about expectations, values. His attempt at casual conversation betraying his lingering discomfort with our new dynamic. It's a tool, not a trophy, I replied gently. It lets me travel efficiently between our offices in San Francisco, Boston, and Austin without losing days to commercial flights. He nodded, considering this practical approach. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about measuring success by more than just financial metrics. And you were right, he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. All this became the goal rather than a byproduct of pursuing something meaningful. It's not too late to broaden that perspective, I suggested. No, it isn't, he agreed, then hesitated before adding, I hope you'll still attend the family meetings. We could benefit from your alternative viewpoint. Coming from my father, this was tantamount to a profound apology. I smiled. I'd like that, though I may still arrive in my Audi sometimes. Your choice of transportation is entirely your own, he said with the ghost of a smile. James approached next, Catherine a half-step behind him. My brother's customary confidence seemed diminished, replaced by a thoughtfulness I rarely saw in him. I've spent my entire career trying to impress father, but when was the last time I felt passionate about a project? I can't remember. It's never too late to find that, I told him. The Mitchell name opens doors, but what you do once you're inside the room is up to you. Would you consider collaborating on something? He asked hesitantly. Not a merger or acquisition, but a project where Mitchell Financial and Tech Care could both contribute? Perhaps something with social impact. The olive branch surprised me. I'd be open to discussing possibilities, I agreed. Our AI systems could potentially help identify underserved communities for responsible development projects. For the first time in years, I saw genuine enthusiasm in my brother's eyes, untainted by competition or obligation. I'll have my team call yours to set up a meeting. Catherine touched my arm awkwardly. I'm sorry for suggesting you needed career guidance. It was condescending. "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said, appreciating her directness. Amber was waiting by the garden steps, uncharacteristically dressed down in jeans and a simple blouse. Without her usual perfect makeup and styled hair, she looked younger, more like the sister I remembered from childhood. "I broke up with Bradley," she announced without preamble. "What? When?" "Last night. After everything that happened, I called him and realized I couldn't go through with it. I don't love him, Cassie. I never did. He was just the right match on paper." "Are you okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She laughed, surprising both of us. "I'm better than I've been in years. It's like, the Sanders connection was valuable. But for once, I'm making a decision for myself, not for the Mitchell brand." I hugged her impulsively. "I'm proud of you, Amber. That takes real courage." "I have a lot to figure out," she admitted. "My whole identity has been wrapped up in what other people think of me. I don't even know who I am without the filters and the followers." "Why don't you come visit me in San Francisco next month?" I suggested. "No fancy events or Instagram moments. Just time to talk and think." Her smile was genuine. "I'd like that." My mother was the last to approach, her composure firmly back in place after the shock of yesterday's revelations. "I've always wanted security for you," she said, adjusting her pearl necklace, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. "When you rejected the path we laid out, I worried you would struggle." "I know, Mother." This was practically effusive praise. "Thank you. Perhaps you could teach me about your company sometime," she offered tentatively. "What you actually do, not just what it's worth." The request surprised me. "I'd be happy to. We're developing systems that help doctors identify rare diseases earlier, when they're more treatable. We've already helped save hundreds of lives." Something shifted in her expression, a glimmer of understanding that went beyond dollars and status. "That's a legacy worth building too." As Ryan signaled that it was time for departure, I took a final look at my family gathered on the terrace of the Mitchell estate. They weren't transformed. One weekend couldn't undo generations of entrenched values. Had created something more valuable than either of us had imagined possible. My life in San Francisco awaited me. My penthouse with its wall of windows overlooking the bay. My team of brilliant engineers and data scientists, the partnership with 3 major hospital systems we were finalizing next week. But more importantly, the sense of purpose that drove me every day. The knowledge that our work was making a tangible difference in people's lives. I had also established an education fund for underprivileged students interested in technology careers, providing scholarships and mentorship opportunities that I wished had been available when I was starting out. Success meant little if it wasn't shared in some meaningful way. The painful irony was that my family's rejection had been the catalyst for my greatest achievements. Their dismissal had freed me from the weight of Mitchell expectations, allowing me to take risks and follow unconventional paths that would have been discouraged within the family business. Their underestimation had fueled my determination to succeed on my own terms. I no longer needed to prove my worth to people who measured value by narrow metrics. I had built success by my own definition: financial, yes, but also meaningful, innovative, and purposeful. The Mitchell legacy hadn't ended with my rejection of the traditional path. It had evolved through it. Dismissed or called poor by people who should have supported you. Remember this. Their limited vision doesn't define your potential. Sometimes the greatest motivation comes from proving wrong those who never believed in you. And sometimes the most satisfying success is the kind that stays true to your own values, even when nobody else understands them. My helicopter wasn't just a mode of transportation or a status symbol. It represented the freedom I had found by charting my own course. A freedom more valuable than any inheritance. Have you ever been underestimated by family or friends who later had to eat their words? Share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey of vindication, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell to hear more stories about turning rejection into triumph. Remember, success is best defined by you, not by others' expectations. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep believing in your vision even when no one else does.